The courtyard of the University of Ouagadougou lay quiet like a still life painting. Old buildings with faded brick walls stood tall amidst towering acacia trees. It was late at night, but a golden glow still spilled from a lecture hall, where a man stood alone holding a small notebook. He wore a simple white shirt, slightly worn khaki trousers, and dusty shoes that seemed to have trekked countless village paths. No one noticed him. No one knew who he was. But this man was no ordinary lecturer. He was Ibrahim Traoré, the president of Burkina Faso, disguised to step into the world of students, the future of his nation. Traoré closed his notebook, his sharp gaze sweeping the courtyard. He wasn't here to flaunt power, cut ribbons, or speak to cameras. He was here to listen to, understand Burkina Faso stood at a crossroads, an outdated education system, underfunded and swayed by foreign curricula. He wanted reform, but not from a desk in the capital. He wanted to hear from the youth who would shape the nation's future. So he chose to blend in, becoming a visiting lecturer under the alias Amadou Diallo. The next morning as the sun rose, the courtyard buzzed with life. Students poured out of dormitories in colorful t-shirts, their laughter mingling with traditional mossy music, blaring from an old speaker. Traoré stood before Lecture Hall 3, clutching a stack of papers. He took a deep breath, adjusted his posture, and stepped inside. About 50 students sat within, some attentive, others distracted by their phones. No one paid much mind to the unassuming, middle-aged man who took the podium. "Good morning, Traoré," began his voice, warm yet commanding. "I'm Amadou Diallo, visiting lecturer for history and African development. Today we'll discuss a question: what makes a nation strong?" A few students looked up, curious. A girl in the front row, wearing glasses, began scribbling notes. But in the corner, a group of 3 students whispered and chuckled. Traoré noticed but didn't react. He wrote on the board, "National pride, unity, knowledge." Then he turned his gaze, sweeping the room. "What do you think?" he asked. "How can a nation like Burkina Faso stand tall in the world?" Silence. A few eyes darted away. Then a hand went up. It was Miriam, the girl with glasses. "Sir, I think it's education. Without good schools and teachers, how can we compete globally?" Traoré smiled, nodding. "Well said, education is the foundation. But what makes education good? Are you satisfied with what you're learning here?" The question rippled through the room like a stone dropped in still water. Some students frowned. The group in the corner stopped laughing, and one boy wearing a soccer jersey spoke up with a mocking tone. "Sir, what's there to be satisfied with? Old books, teachers spouting theory, and foreigners coming here acting like we know nothing." The room erupted in laughter. Traoré didn't flinch. He stepped down from the podium, approaching the boy. "What's your name?" "Soliman," the boy replied, slightly embarrassed by the attention. "Soliman, you're partly right," Traoré said calmly. "But if we only complain, will anything change? Tell me, how would you improve education here?" Soliman faltered, caught off guard. He stammered, then said, I want computers, labs, and practical courses, not just memorizing colonial-era stuff." Traoré nodded, his eyes gleaming. "Good, that's a start. Today we'll discuss how education can serve us, not someone else." The class grew lively. Miriam asked about the role of traditional culture in education. Another student, Issa, shared his dream of becoming an engineer, but lamented the lack of equipment. Traoré listened, took notes, and encouraged each voice. But in the corner, Soliman's group whispered, their eyes skeptical. They had no idea the man before them held the fate of their nation. Across campus, in a plush office with cool air conditioning, Professor Pierre Dubois sat on a leather chair, flipping through a stack of documents. Dubois, a French scholar, was the chief advisor for an educational partnership between Burkina Faso and a European organization. With his silver hair, expensive suit, and polished voice, he had a knack for making others feel small. To Dubois, Burkina Faso was just a stepping stone to bolster his reputation before returning to Paris. Amadou Diallo Dubois muttered, reading Traoré's file. "No international degrees, no notable publications. Where did this man come from?" Beside him, a young assistant, Aisha, replied, "Professor Mr. Diallo was invited by the history department. They say he has practical experience in local communities." "Practical," Dubois scoffed, tossing the file onto the desk. "We need world-class minds here. Not village storytellers. Arrange a meeting with him. I want to see what this Diallo is made of." Aisha nodded, though unease stirred within her. As a Burkinabe, she was used to Dubois' condescending attitude. He often called local curricula backward and insisted students follow Western models, but Aisha stayed silent. She needed this job to support her family. Traoré's second lecture took place that afternoon. This time he delivered a talk on Burkina Faso's history of resistance from the anti-French struggle to the Sankara movement. He spoke of Thomas Sankara, the revolutionary president with infectious passion. Sankara believed a nation cannot grow if it depends on others. What do you think? Are we still dependent? The question sparked a lively debate. Miriam raised her hand. I think we are. Look at our textbooks, mostly written abroad. Even professors like... She hesitated, glancing at the door where Dubois had just entered. Dubois stood at the entrance, arms crossed, his gaze icy. The students fell silent. Traoré looked at him, offering a slight smile. Welcome, Professor. Join us, we're discussing self-reliance in education. Dubois didn't smile. He strode in, took a seat at the back, and motioned for Traoré to continue. His presence cast a pall over the room. Soliman, sitting nearby, whispered to a friend, "Is this Westerner here to check on Teacher Diallo? He's done for." Traoré pressed on, undeterred. He spoke of how Sankara built schools and promoted education in local languages. He posed a question. If you could decide, how would you change education here? Issa raised his hand. I want courses on technology and entrepreneurship. We can't keep studying just history or literature. Dubois interrupted, his voice cutting. Technology and entrepreneurship. Young man, do you realize teaching those requires infrastructure and experts? This country lacks. Perhaps you should learn to write a proper essay first. The room went still. Issa's face flushed as he looked down. Traoré met Dubois' gaze, his eyes sharp as a blade, but his voice remained calm. Professor Dubois, I agree infrastructure matters, but if we don't believe in our students' potential, no amount of computers will save us. Dubois smirked. Potential, Mr. Diallo. I've worked in Africa for 20 years. Potential isn't enough. You need systems, discipline, and international standards. Do you think stories about Sankara can change the world? A few students winced. Miriam gripped her pen but stayed silent. Traoré smiled, stepping closer to Dubois. Professor Sankara said, we must dare to invent the future. I believe the future lies with these students. What do you believe in? Dubois didn't answer immediately. He stood, adjusted his tie, and said, we'll see what you can do. Mr. Diallo, I'll be watching closely. He left, leaving a heavy silence in his wake. That night, Traoré sat in the small room assigned to visiting lecturers. Moonlight streamed through the window, casting silver across the desk. He opened his notebook, jotting down what he'd heard: Issa's dream of technology, Soliman's frustration, Miriam's faith in local culture. He knew Dubois wasn't just an arrogant professor. He represented a larger system, one that wanted to keep Burkina Faso tethered to foreign education models. Elsewhere on campus, Dubois met Soliman and his two friends in a small cafe. Want to study in Europe? Dubois asked, sliding an envelope of cash across the table. Do me a favor. Make things difficult for Mr. Diallo. Ask tough questions, disrupt his class. He doesn't belong here. Soliman eyed the money, hesitating. But he doesn't seem bad, Dubois chuckled. Boy, not everyone deserves to stand at the podium. Do this and I'll secure you a scholarship. Soliman nodded, but his eyes betrayed conflict. The next morning, Traoré entered the lecture hall with calm resolve. He knew challenges were coming as he began a lecture on youth in revolutions. Soliman raised his hand, his tone defiant. Teacher Diallo, you talk about national pride, but we're poor, we're weak. How can we compete globally when we have nothing? The room turned to look. Traoré smiled, stepping closer to Soliman. You're right, we face many challenges, but poverty doesn't mean weakness. Our strength lies here. He touched his chest, and here. He pointed to his head. Tell me, Soliman, what do you want this nation to become? The question silenced Soliman. He hadn't expected to be challenged back. The room waited, and somewhere in his heart, a spark ignited, a spark of hope, of belief. But he didn't yet know that the man before him wasn't just a teacher. He was the one who would reshape his future, and that of the entire nation. Students, Traoré began. Today we'll talk about self-reliance, not just in education, but in how we think and live. Self-reliance means we shape our own future, not letting others do it for us. But how do we achieve that? Miriam, the bespectacled girl in the front row, raised her hand immediately. Sir, I think it starts with understanding our history. If we don't know where we come from, how can we know where we're going? Traoré nodded, his eyes gleaming. Exactly, Miriam, history is the foundation. But history isn't just dates in a book. It's the story of people like you, those who dare to dream and act. In the corner, Suleiman sat with his arms crossed, his gaze skeptical. Beside him, his friends Musa and Fatimata whispered, occasionally glancing at Traoré. The previous night, Professor Pierre Dubois' offer echoed in Suleiman's mind. The money in the envelope was enough to buy a motorbike, enough to impress his friends, but every time he met Mr. Diallo's eyes, an odd unease stirred within him. There was something about this man, his calm demeanor, his piercing gaze, that made Suleiman hesitate. Suleiman, Traoré called suddenly, cutting through the boy's thoughts. What do you think about self-reliance? Do you believe we can shape our own future? The room turned to look. Suleiman stood, flustered, hands in his pockets. Sir, I don't know. It's easy to talk, but reality is tough. We lack money, technology. Big countries like France or America are always ahead. How can we catch up? A few students nodded in agreement. Traoré stepped down from the podium, approaching Suleiman. You're right, we face many challenges. But do you know the greatest strength of a nation isn't in money or machines? It's here. He touched his chest, and here, he pointed to his head. If we believe in ourselves, nothing is impossible. Suleiman shrugged and sat down, but his defiant edge softened. Something in Traoré's words unsettled him. Musa beside him nudged his shoulder. This guy talks well, but Dubois said he's just a storyteller. Don't fall for it. Traoré continued the lecture, recounting how Burkina Faso built schools under Thomas Sankara. Despite scarce resources, he encouraged discussion, and the room grew lively. Issa, the aspiring engineer, proposed a student-run technology lab. Miriam suggested incorporating Mossi culture into the curriculum. Even Fatimata, usually quiet, spoke up about needing more scholarships for female students. But in the back row, a figure watched silently. Pierre Dubois, in a gray suit, sat with a notebook, jotting down Traoré's every word. He didn't smile or clap like the students. His gaze was cold, like a wolf stalking prey. That evening, at a small cafe outside campus, Dubois summoned Suleiman, Musa, and Fatimata. The place was bustling, the aroma of roasted coffee mingling with smoke from a nearby charcoal stove. Dubois sat in a dim corner, sipping espresso, his aristocratic air stark against the worn wooden tables. You've done well, Dubois said, sliding another envelope across the table. But it's not enough. Mr. Diallo is stirring up the students. His ideas, self-reliance, local history are nonsense. You need to push harder. Disrupt his class, ask tough questions, make him look foolish. Fatimata frowned. Professor Mr. Diallo. He's not bad today. He listened to us, unlike other teachers. Dubois smirked. Young lady, you're naive, swayed by emotions. Diallo has no credentials, no experience. He's disrupting our program. Want to study in Paris? Do as I say. Suleiman glanced at the envelope, then at Fatimata. He recalled Traoré's eyes in class, the way he said his name, as if seeing into his soul. I'll try, he said softly. But what if he answers? Dubois raised an eyebrow. Answers, boy. I've met hundreds like him. They talk well, but achieve nothing. Do it and the scholarship is yours. The next day, Traoré entered the lecture hall with a new plan. He wanted an open debate where students could ask questions and share ideas freely. Today, he said, we won't study theory. You'll teach me. Tell me, what do you want this country to be in 10 years? The room buzzed. Miriam stood first. I want Burkina Faso to have the best universities in Africa, where students don't need to go abroad to learn. Issa followed. I want tech companies founded by Burkinabe like Silicon Valley, but with our identity. Then Suleiman stood, his eyes glinting with challenge. Teacher Diallo, you talk about self-reliance, but even this university depends on foreign money. Professor Dubois says without them, we'd have nothing. What do you say? The room fell silent. Some students glanced at Dubois, who had just entered, and stood by the door. Traoré smiled unfazed. Good question, Suleiman. Yes, we receive foreign aid, but aid doesn't mean dependence. If we use that money to build our future schools, labs, businesses, that's self-reliance. If we let others decide how it's spent, that's slavery. Dubois clapped slowly, his tone mocking, very touching, Mr. Diallo. But my program has brought millions of euros to this school. What will you replace it with? Lectures about Sankara? Students whispered. Some sided with Dubois, others watched Traoré waiting. Traoré stepped closer to Dubois, his voice calm but sharp. Professor, money is a tool, not a goal. If your program helps students, I support it. But if it makes them feel inferior, it doesn't deserve to exist. Applause erupted from Mariam, and Issa Dubois' face reddened, but he maintained composure. We'll see, Mr. Diallo. I propose a major seminar next week where you and I present our visions to the entire university. Do you dare take the challenge? Traoré nodded. I accept, but not just you and me. Let the students speak. They are the future. Dubois sneered and left. Suleiman sat heart-pounding. He hadn't expected Diallo's sharp response. Musa whispered, he's tough, but Dubois won't let this slide. In the days that followed, tension gripped the University of Ouagadougou. News of the seminar spread, drawing attention from faculty and students alike. Dubois, with Aisha's help, prepared a flashy presentation filled with data and images of European-funded projects. He believed Traoré, with his simple appearance and lack of credentials, couldn't compete, but Traoré wasn't worried. He spent time with students outside class, listening to their dreams and fears. One evening, under an acacia tree in the courtyard, he sat with Mariam, Issa, and others. Moonlight illuminated their faces, creating a warm, intimate scene. Teacher Diallo, Issa asked, aren't you afraid of Professor Dubois? He has money connections. If you lose at the seminar, they'll fire you. Traoré smiled gently. Issa, I'm not afraid of losing. I'm only afraid of not speaking the truth. You know, when I was young, I thought I couldn't change anything. But I learned that if we unite, nothing is impossible. Mariam looked at him, eyes shining. You sound like President Traoré. He always talks about unity and self-reliance. Traoré smiled, saying nothing. He changed the subject. Let's talk about the seminar. What do you want to present? This is your chance to make your voices heard. The group brainstormed. Mariam suggested a short video on Burkina Faso's education history. Issa proposed showcasing his tech lab idea. Even shy Fatimata offered to discuss skill-building classes for female students. Traoré noted everything, encouraging each one, but he noticed Suleiman's absence. Meanwhile, in Dubois' office, Suleiman stood before the desk, fists clenched. Professor, I'm not sure I want to continue, he said, voice trembling. Mr. Diallo, he's not what you said. He cares about us. Dubois slammed the desk, startling Aisha in the corner. Boy, who do you think you are? I gave you a chance. If you back out, forget the scholarship, I'll make sure you never graduate. Suleiman swallowed hard, his eyes wavering. He thought of his mother toiling at the market to fund his studies. He thought of Traoré's gaze piercing his soul. I'll try once more, he said, voice faltering. Dubois nodded, satisfied. Good at the seminar. I want you to ask this question. He slid a paper across the desk. Suleiman skimmed it, eyes widening. The question was carefully crafted, sharp, designed to humiliate Traoré before the university. But in Suleiman's heart, a storm was brewing. The night before the seminar, Traoré sat alone in his small room. Moonlight spilled through the window, casting silver over his notebook. He opened it, rereading his notes about the students, Issa's dreams, Mariam's faith, Suleiman's discontent. He knew Dubois was planning an attack, but he wasn't afraid. He had faced greater challenges, coup, international plots. Compared to those, Dubois was a mere breeze. He stood stepping into the courtyard. Under the moonlight, he gazed at the starry sky, taking a deep breath. Sankara, he whispered, as if speaking to an old friend. You were right. The future lies with the youth. I won't let them down. On the morning of the seminar, the University of Ouagadougou came alive. The courtyard blazed with banners in green, yellow, and red, the colors of Burkina Faso's flag draped across every pathway. The distant beat of djembe drums mingled with the chatter of students gathering before the Grand Hall. Today was more than a seminar. It was a battle between Professor Pierre Dubois' vision, backed by European organizations, and the ideas of Amadou Diallo, the unassuming visiting lecturer no one suspected was President Ibrahim Traoré. The Grand Hall was packed. Hundreds of students, faculty, and a few local journalists squeezed onto wooden benches. Light streamed through high windows, illuminating the stage, where two large signs stood, one reading International Vision for Dubois, the other Burkina Faso's Future for Diallo. In the front row, Mariam, Issa, and Fatimata sat together, clutching their prepared materials. Suleiman sat in a corner, his eyes wavering, hands gripping the paper Dubois had given him. The question on it was a sharp blade poised to unsettle Diallo before the crowd. Traoré entered the hall still in his white shirt and worn khaki trousers. No one clapped. A few students whispered, mocking his simplicity, but his sharp, calm gaze silenced the murmurs. He stepped onto the stage, placed his small notebook on the podium, and smiled. "Thank you for being here. Today, we're not just talking about education. We're talking about our future." Dubois followed in a navy suit with a glossy silk tie. He strode with the confidence of someone accustomed to power, flashing a smug smile at the journalists. He sat opposite Traoré, signaling his assistant Aisha to start the projector. A large screen lit up with charts, statistics, and images of European-funded education projects. The university president, an elderly man with silver hair, opened the event. "Today we'll hear two visions for the future of our university's education. Professor Dubois will present, first followed by Mr. Amadou Diallo. Then students will have the chance to ask questions." Dubois stood adjusting the microphone and began. His voice was smooth, persuasive. "Ladies and gentlemen, education is a bridge to the world. Over the past 20 years, my program has brought millions of euros to this university: computers, textbooks, and scholarships to Europe. But to compete globally, we need international standards. Burkina Faso's students must learn to write essays, conduct research, and think like their peers in Paris or London." He displayed an image of a sleek lab in France, then turned to the audience. "Mr. Diallo may talk about history and national pride, but history doesn't create jobs. We need realism. Without Europe's support, this university would collapse." Applause erupted, mostly from faculty and some students. Dubois smirked, glancing at Traoré as if he'd already won. Souleymane bowed his head, clutching the paper. Dubois' words made sense, but a part of his heart recalled Diallo's gaze, a gaze that seemed to see through everything. Traoré stood, using no projector, no charts, just his small notebook. He stepped to the center of the stage, his eyes sweeping the crowd. "Professor Dubois is partly right," he began, his voice low but resonant. "We need computers, labs, and opportunities, but who decides what we need? People in Paris and London, or us?" The hall fell silent. Traoré continued. "I asked you, what do you want this country to be?" Mariam spoke of schools rooted in Burkina Faso's identity. Issa dreams of our own tech companies. Fatimata wants opportunities for female students. These aren't pipe dreams. They're the future we can build if we believe in ourselves. He held up his notebook. "This contains your ideas, not mine, not Professor Dubois. You are the ones who will shape Burkina Faso. But to do that, we must break free from a mindset of dependence. Education isn't about pleasing others. It's about standing tall, proud, and creative." Applause roared louder this time from the students. Mariam smiled, eyes gleaming. Issa clapped until his hands reddened, but Dubois, seated, grimaced. He signaled Souleymane, his eyes commanding. Souleymane stood, heart pounding. He raised his hand, voice trembling. "So Mr. Diallo, you talk about self-reliance, but what proof do you have that we can do it? You have no international degrees, no academic papers. Why should we trust you to lead us?" The hall held its breath. Some students whispered, shocked by Souleymane's boldness. Dubois smiled smugly. Leaning back, Aisha in the corner bowed her head ashamed. Traoré looked at Souleymane, not angry, not flustered. He smiled, stepping closer. "Good question, Souleymane. You want to know why you should trust me? I have no degrees from Paris or London, no papers in international journals, but I have something no school can teach: faith in the people of Burkina Faso." He turned to the crowd, his voice thundering. "I'm not here to teach you how to write essays or do research. I'm here to remind you that you're the descendants of Sankara, of warriors who fought for freedom. You don't need anyone's permission to dream big. You just need to dare." The hall erupted. Students leapt to their feet, clapping. Cheering Mariam wiped tears. Issa shouted, "Yes, Fatimata!" For the first time, clapped until her hands hurt. Souleymane stood frozen, the paper slipping from his hand to the floor. He looked at Traoré and for the first time felt regret. Dubois shot up, face red. "Enough," he shouted, drowning the applause. "Mr. Diallo, you're inciting students with empty rhetoric. You have no right to stand here. Who are you to challenge our system?" The room hushed. All eyes turned to Traoré. He stood tall, his gaze sharp as a blade. Slowly, he stepped to the stage's center, unbuttoned his white shirt, revealing a black t-shirt with the words, Burkina Faso. First, he looked straight at Dubois, his voice low but heavy as lead. I am Ibrahim Traoré, President of Burkina Faso, and I'm not here to challenge you, Professor Dubois. I'm here to challenge myself and this nation to build a future no one can take away. The hall exploded. Students screamed, jumped up, clapped until the walls shook. Some cried, embracing each other. Mariam covered her mouth, eyes wide. Issa yelled, "The president, it's him!" Fatimata trembled, unable to believe her eyes. Soleiman collapsed into his seat, face pale. He looked at the paper on the floor, then at Traoré, his heart heavy. Dubois stood stunned, mouth agape. He stumbled back, bumping into a chair, muttering, "Impossible." The president. Aisha in the corner covered her mouth, tears streaming. She knew Dubois had gone too far, and now the consequences were coming. Traoré raised a hand, silencing the crowd. I didn't come here to flaunt my identity. He said, I came to listen to you. Over the past 2 weeks, I've seen your dreams, your anger, your hope. Professor Dubois is right. We need computers labs, but we don't need anyone to teach us how to think. Today, I announce a new scholarship fund, the Sankara Fund, to support you in technology, entrepreneurship, and culture. And I want you, Mariam, Issa, Fatimata, Soleimani, to help build it. The crowd roared again. Journalists raised cameras, snapping furiously. Some students began singing the national anthem, their voices echoing through the hall. Dubois, pale, tried to slip toward the door, but a group of plainclothes guards blocked his path. A tall man in military uniform entered, saluting Traoré. Mr. President, we have orders to escort Professor Dubois to the office for investigation. Dubois panicked. Investigation? For what? I was doing my job. Traoré looked at him, voice cold. Professor, you manipulated students, insulted their dignity, and treated this country like a colony. In Burkina Faso, we don't tolerate that. The guards led Dubois away amid the crowd's stunned gazes. Soleiman, still in the corner, stood trembling and approached Traoré. Sir, Your Excellency, he said, voice choking. I'm sorry, I was wrong. I didn't know. I just wanted a chance. Traoré placed a hand on his shoulder, his gaze kind but firm. Soleiman, mistakes don't define a person. What defines you is how you rise. I believe you can. The young man bowed his head. Tears falling, Mariam and Issa rushed over, hugging Soleiman, pulling him into a circle of forgiveness and unity. The seminar ended, but the story didn't. News of the event spread like wildfire. Articles dubbed it the day the moonlit Ouagadougou. On social media, hashtags Shocker, Traoré Pride, and Sankara Fund trended globally. Students across Africa shared videos of Traoré's speech, calling him the flame of a new generation. Dubois faced investigation for manipulation and abuse of power. Despite French embassy intervention, Traoré was clear. This is Burkina Faso, not a colony. Justice will be served. Ultimately, Dubois was deported, and his program was reviewed to ensure it served local students' interests. Aisha, after witnessing it all, resigned and joined the Sankara Fund, working to support female students. She told Traoré, you showed me I can be part of this future. Soleiman, Mariam, Issa, and Fatimata became the first to join the Sankara Fund. They designed courses in technology, culture, and entrepreneurship, turning their dreams into reality. Soleiman, once tempted by money, now spoke to other students, sharing his story as a cautionary tale. A month later, Traoré returned to the University of Ouagadougou, no longer disguised in his presidential military uniform. He stood under the acacia tree where he'd sat with students under the moonlight. The crowd surrounded him, singing the national anthem, holding signs that read, "We are the future." Traoré looked at them, smiled, and said, "You don't need me to lead you. You are the moonlight illuminating the path ahead.